Outside the terminal, in a pharmacy, a gas station, a corner store, a 20-ounce bottle of Dasani runs about $1.69. Past security at JFK, that same bottle averages $3.49. That's not a typo. At one JFK terminal store, a single liter of water rang up at $7.66. Same product, exact same water. The only thing that changed between the gas station and the terminal gate is that you walked through a checkpoint. And once you did, the price was whatever they decided it was. This is not a glitch. It is the system working correctly. Somebody designed this. Here's how.
Passengers spend an average of $7 for every hour they spend in a terminal. That's not an accident. That number is the product of an enormous amount of deliberate engineering. The layout, the lighting, the smell of cinnamon rolls that seems to follow you through every concourse in America. You are, by the time you clear that checkpoint, inside a commercial system that was specifically designed for the version of you who is stressed, bored, slightly dehydrated, and not going anywhere. By the end of this, you'll know exactly who set that price, why nobody's stopping it, and the one airport in America that proves none of this was ever necessary.
Here's the part that should bother you more than the price itself. Most major U.S. airports have official rules saying vendors can charge no more than 10 to 15% above street price. That policy exists. It is written down in documents that the airports filed. And yet that same water bottle routinely sells for double the going rate or more. A senior aviation consultant put it plainly: the airport has to commit to enforcement, or the pricing controls will simply be ignored. The airport sets the rule. The airport is also the landlord. The tenants pay the landlord a percentage of everything they earn. The landlord profits when the tenants do well. So the rule sits there, the prices sit higher, and nobody is especially surprised.
To understand why the prices are what they are, you have to understand what it actually costs to open a store inside an airport. And the answer is a lot more than you'd think. First, there's rent. The median food and beverage location at a North American airport pays the equivalent of about 12.8% of everything it earns, on top of a guaranteed minimum floor, whichever is higher. That floor doesn't go down. In some airports, it goes up 3% every year, regardless of sales. And that's just the revenue cut. The median rent per square foot for a food and beverage spot at a North American airport is $135. Street-side restaurant space, by comparison, is a small fraction of that. Then there's construction. Getting a food stall open inside a terminal costs somewhere between $450 and $2,000 per square foot, versus about $56 for a regular restaurant. And that's before you've sold a single bottle of anything. Everything that comes into the terminal, supplies, equipment, even the knives the kitchen uses, has to clear security. Staff pay for parking and pass through security checks every single shift. Operators say that airport jobs pay as much as $2 an hour more than the equivalent work outside the terminal, which sounds like great news for workers and is real cost pressure on vendors. So the price on the bottle is not pure greed. The cost stack is real. The question worth asking is who decided those costs should fall on passengers in the first place? And the short answer is, the airport did. Because a handful of large companies, one of which operates stores in over 20 of the 25 biggest airports in the U.S., bid for exclusive rights to sell in those terminals and agreed to those terms to get in. Once they're in, you're not choosing between vendors. You're choosing between which door of the same company to walk through.
None of this is new. But the part that made the current situation permanent happened in a single month in 2006. In August of that year, British authorities foiled an al-Qaeda plot to detonate liquid explosives on U.S.-bound flights. The plan was to smuggle bomb materials inside plastic soda bottles. The response was fast. In September 2006, the TSA introduced what became known as the 311 rule. Containers of 3.4 ounces or less in a single quart-sized bag through security. Any larger liquid, a full water bottle, a sports drink, a coffee from outside, gets thrown away at the checkpoint or left behind. There it is. one terrorism response, never repealed, quietly handed airport vendors a captive beverage monopoly that has run for close to 20 years. The thing is, airports had been partially captive markets long before 2006, but with the liquids rule, the last exit closed. You can't bring water in, you can't easily walk out and back in to get it cheaper. You are, thermodynamically speaking, stuck.
Here's the other piece. Airports are mostly nonprofit public entities, and aviation regulations limit how much they can charge airlines for things like landing fees and gates, so they can't just raise airline costs to cover their bills. Non-aeronautical revenue, concessions, accounts for roughly 40% of total airport revenue globally. In North America, it's closer to 46%. The terminal shops are not a convenience. They are how the airport pays for itself. Which means the airports have every reason to keep those rents high, and every reason to not enforce the pricing caps that would lower their tenants' revenue and therefore lower the airport's cut. The $6 water is doing a lot of structural work. The captive beverage market you are standing inside at the gate was created as a terrorism response. One foiled bomb plot close to 20 years ago turned every airport water fountain into a business opportunity that has compounded ever since. That's the whole thing. Not a conspiracy, not malice exactly, a security rule from 2006 that closed the one exit passengers had, and nobody, in close to 20 years, has looked at it and said, actually, maybe we should check what that did to the price of a Dasani.
There are several layers to this that are worth noting, because the situation is somehow worse than it looks. One, the pricing cap at most airports is calculated against something called street price, which turns out to be a surprisingly flexible concept. The term is ambiguous enough that an airport vendor could, in theory, argue street price means a gift shop at a zoo. That's not a joke. That is what an aviation consultant said in print. Two, the JFK store that charged $7.66 for a liter of water also, at the register, asked the customer to leave a tip on a water bottle.
3. The Port Authority of New York and New Jersey ran a full year-long investigation after a passenger's story about a $28 beer at Newark went viral. The investigation concluded. The investigation promised fair prices. $8 water bottles at JFK stayed right where they were. 4. Look past the branded storefronts and the situation clarifies. The Wendy's and the TGI Fridays in many airport concourses are not competing with each other. They are often run by the same management company, which licensed the brands from the actual chains. The choice between gates is a prop.
Here's what's actually going on. The price is not a coincidence. It is the output of a system. Exclusive concession rights, high fixed rents, a liquids rule that eliminates outside competition, and a landlord that profits when its tenants do well. The water costs $6 because every part of the structure pushes it there. But here's the thing. One airport proved none of this is inevitable. Portland International Airport has required vendors to charge the same prices inside the terminal as they charge at their regular Portland locations, no markup, since the 1980s. According to one airport pricing study, Portland's average domestic beer comes in at $4.41. The nationwide airport average in the same study was $8.02. The airport says its retail sales run significantly above the national average. People spend more when they don't feel trapped.
Salt Lake City adopted the same model in 2022, and concession sales went up. The only thing either airport changed was choosing not to overcharge. No federal regulator has set a price cap on airport water. Cities have pressured, investigations have launched and concluded. The water is still $8 at JFK, because the structure that set the price is also the structure responsible for changing it. The individual fix costs nothing. Bring an empty bottle and fill it at a fountain past security. At least some terminals at major airports have hydration stations past the checkpoint, worth checking before you fly. The captive hallway stays,
but you don't have to pay for the water inside it. Before a dead accountant's rule makes it a very expensive oversight, pack a bottle. Speaking of systems designed to quietly take your money, there's another one running every time you sit down at a restaurant. The tip wasn't always a near-mandatory 20%. How it became a guilt tax baked into every payment terminal in America is its own strange story. That one is already up.